I dressed like Marmoth, the serial killer, for Cherry's killer Halloween party. I wore a stonewashed bid denim overalls with my old checkered shirt. I also donned a gray ivy hat and engineer boots. I gave my face a little gothic makeup, pale face, dark smoky eyes, and lips painted black so that I looked like Marmoth died and incarnated as a vampire. Marmoth Norton was a serial killer, was a killer who tormented our city 2 years ago. It was said that he had killed a total of 41 people before he was caught. The police kept information concerning Norton classified, so everyone just made up stories and speculated all sorts. Some said Norton was never caught, that he was done with Dallas and has left to go torment some other city. We did hear of some killings in Box Springs not long after the police announced that Norton had been caught. There were other rumors, too, that the police did catch Norton, but he escaped. The party started around 12 in the afternoon. Gang after gang, the popular kids of Sundale High filed into Cherry's house. So did the nerds and noobs. There were many Hannibal Lecters, Michael Myers, and Jason Voorhees. It was a killer party, literally and metaphorically. I rolled with Steve Martin, quarterback of our White Knights team. He's arguably the most popular kid in school. Steve and I had been friends since we were kids. We basically lived right next to each other. I don't play football, but I was the head of the drama unit. My performance as Shakespeare's Antony stayed golden in everyone's mind for a very long time. I was as popular among the girls as Steve. He was dressed like Leatherface, butcher apron and mask and all. He even brought his Poulan 306A, but the blade was made of plastic and painted to look like metal. Cherry Montero's parents were away on a business trip. She got back with her boyfriend, Big Sam, and she decided to throw a party for that. Big Sam's favorite time of year was Halloween, so Cherry decided to make the party a Halloween party. Her place was big, a luxury home. There was a large swimming pool, and another one indoors, which was reserved for VIPs. They had a bowling alley, media room, home bar, and several large rooms. The sheer opulence of the mansion was enough to drive an average guy like me nuts, but I kept it cool. Most of us chilled in the living room when we first arrived. The living room seemed bigger than the whole building where I lived with my parents. Steve and I and the guys we were with gathered in the bar area of the living room. There was loud music playing. We all had red cups in hand, drinking booze and talking about football and women. Some girls joined us later. Most of them clustered around Steve, who was barely saying anything but kept the girls laughing. Some of them tried to hit on me, but I wasn't in the mood. I spotted Lucy in the crowd. My heart melted. All the makeup in the world and I would still recognize her. She was the major reason why I decided to come to this party. She was one of Cherry's friends. We dated for a while, then we broke up. I'd been thinking about her of late. No other girl made me feel the way she made me feel. Maybe it was her smile or the sound of her laugh. She was perfection to me. Steve hit my arm gently with his elbow. He'd seen that I was eyeing Lucy. "You gonna walk up to her?" he asked. "I'm going to get another drink." "From where?" "We're at the bar. There should be a wine cellar somewhere. I'll check that out." "That's my boy. Go get her, Roy," Steve said with a grin that made me want to break his perfect face with my fist. Midnight Stories. Cherry stopped the music, and everyone started protesting. "Shut up and listen, fuckers," Cherry yelled. And then everyone started laughing. She knew how to command attention. I'll give her that. "Are we having fun, killers?" she yelled again. Everyone cheered loudly, raising their cups and spilling drinks. Killers. The word inspired a horrendous feeling in me. I looked around me and found that I was in the midst of pop culture's vilest murderers. It felt really dramatic. Who would have thought? Ghostface and Freddy Krueger could have been in the same room. As if that wasn't horrible enough, there were more than one of each. Okay, I knew these characters deeply. Most of the movies I've watched over and over again. I know how deadly these characters are. I know the depths of their inhumanity and the scale of their wickedness. I enjoy watching the spectacles they wreak, and they're characters I value as significant to film. But being in the same room with even just one of these characters wasn't something I'd wished for anyone. Yet, here we are. I was beginning to think too much, and I was getting overwhelmed. Then I remembered. I was Mammoth Norton. I'm a part of this horror. There was nothing to be afraid of. Besides, these are just a bunch of kids being silly. My mind came back to Cherry, who seems to have been talking forever. She was dressed in a green nurse uniform and a nursing cap. Her auburn hair was styled in a wrapped-up curly bun. She was Sarah Paulson's Nurse Ratchet. "This party's to celebrate the return of the power couple," Cherry said. Power couple. She's the successor of a dynasty, so she was most of, not all, the power. Big Sam was the White Knights linebacker. He was the biggest student in school. He was 6 feet 3 inches tall. He was ripped, great biceps, chest, and really impressive jawline. While Cherry's power was in wealth, Sam's power was in his body. He looked like Cherry's bodyguard whenever they were together. "Y'all remember how I broke up with Sam last month?" Cherry said. Actually, Sam broke up with Cherry because he caught her sleeping with someone else. "Well, we decided to let go of our differences and come back together." Everyone clapped and cheered. "Sam," Cherry said, facing Sam. I turned to see Sam. He was shirtless, of course. His entire body to his face was covered in green paint. He was Hulk. I would probably have a word with him later. Why would anyone wear Hulk into a party for maniacal killers was beyond me. Hulk's a good guy. "You are the best thing that's ever happened to me." "I'm sorry I broke your heart," Cherry said. "Never again." Everyone cheered. Someone put the music back on and the party continued. The room was switched into dark mode and the club lights were switched on. The real party began. The killer party. By this time, nearly everyone was drunk, and now became wild and mindless. Everyone looked more scary now in the dull red lights. My head began to spin. I wanted to puke. The party was moved into the in-house pool, where only the most popular kids were allowed to go in. I got in. The pool quickly became filled with couples. I looked at Lucy. She looked like she was somewhere else. I knew she wasn't into this. "Want to get out?" I asked her. She smiled. I wish I could. Cherry made me promise to keep an eye on her. In parties like this, she got drunk and became reckless. I wanted to protest that she had her own life too, but I said nothing. I told Lucy I had to go to work and rushed outside. Outside was a whole new world entirely. It was like another party was going on out here. I saw some kids vomit in the swimming pool. I went to one of the lawns and retched myself. I didn't drink enough to get drunk, but I did drink enough to feel irritated by the presence of the most disgusting characters on film. They'd look so real under the dull red lights. Maybe I should stop watching horror films. I had no idea they jumbled my head this much. I checked my wristwatch. It was 5:30. I got into my truck and drove to work. I didn't bother changing my clothes. I worked the drive-in. Minutes quickly turned into hours. The sun vanished from sight, and the clouds became dreary. When darkness had fully enshrouded the sky at 7 p.m., I got a rush of customers. They were all parked and hungry and impatient, honking and yelling for service. The rush of customers lasted an hour or so, and then everything was quiet again. Not a single customer for the next hour. I just stayed at my station, gazing at the sky. There were no stars in sight. It was looking like a bleak night. Small currents of cold wind sifted through the night, giving me chills. I sighed. I couldn't wait for the night to be over. I closed 10 p.m., which was less than 2 hours away. I picked up the novel I was currently reading, Something Wicked This Way Comes, by Ray Bradbury. I always loved it when the fantasy mixed with horror. I was sucked into the pandemonium carnival, and I followed Will and Jim on their terrific adventure. The particular novel was not scary to me, not like Stephen King's The Shining was, but it was thrilling. The strangeness of the characters in the novel, especially Mr. Dark, made my mind waver back into the early hours of the day at Cherry's place. I was getting overwhelmed again. It must be something in the drink I had. The words of the novel began to warp before my eyes, and I was reading like 100 books in a single page. I was seeing all the terrifying ghosts of Stephen King's Overlook Hotel and of Shirley Jackson's Hill House on the pages of the novel I was staring at. And all manner of dreadful things and images began to form in my head. I started seeing all the murderers from Cherry's party again. I shut the novel and threw it down, breathing hard. I had no idea of what I just experienced. Maybe I really should stay off anything horror for a while. At around 9:30 p.m., I heard a car horn. I was delighted to have another customer, even though this one could be my last for the evening. I went to meet the customer. He was resting on the hood of his car. To my surprise, he was dressed like I was, like Marmouth Norton. "Hey, cool costume," the guy said to me. He looked young, younger than I was, but he was as big as I was. "Yeah, you too," I said. "You were at the party?" I asked. I didn't recognize him. He could be a junior. I was a senior. "Yeah, I was. Great party, am I right?" There was something nervous about his voice. But after my experience with that page of Bradbury's novel, I just decided that I was being absurd. "Yeah, Cherry knows how to throw her parties." I chuckled, staring at him, waiting for him to tell me his order. "Oh, I'm Greg, by the way," he said, extending a hand to shake mine. I took his hand. "Big fan of Marmouth?" he asked me. I thought it was a rather strange question. I didn't know exactly how to respond. Not particularly. We were supposed to dress up as monsters, right? Marmouth is one of the scariest monsters I know because he's real." "Oh," he sounded disappointed at my answer. "Well, I find him an artistic killer. He picks his victims carefully and kills them with such brilliant sophistication." I remained quiet because I didn't know how to respond to him. "Marmouth Norton kidnapped his victims and took them to his basement to lock them up for days. It's a big tragedy he was caught," Greg said. I nodded my head, unsure of what the hell this guy was going on about. "Although I believe he escaped and will be back." "You want him to come back?" I was forced to ask. "Why not? There was so much life in this city while he was here." "No, Greg. There was death. Only death," I said blatantly. "Give me your order, because I feared if he kept on talking, I might be tempted to beat him up." "I'll have 2 Big Macs, thank you." "Oh, and I'll have a chicken nugget and apple pie, too." "There will be feasting when I get home tonight," he said and smiled. I left to get the order. While his food packages were being prepared, I looked out through one of the restaurant windows to study Greg. He was a really strange guy. I wondered how I'd never seen him in school. The way he talked about Marmouth got me on edge. When his order was prepared, I collected the packages and took them to his car. By the time I got to his car, he was already inside it. He told me to help him put the packages in his trunk. He pressed a button and the trunk popped open. I hesitated at first. I didn't like what I was feeling. There was something ominous around the boy. I shun off the feeling. It wasn't Greg. It was me. I'd not been myself since I got half drunk at Sherry's party. I went to his trunk and opened it. At first, I thought I was seeing things. At the moment, I was seeing Lucy, tied up and folded inside the trunk. She looked very dead. While I was trying to decide whether this was real or not, I was hit hard in the head. It was Greg. I didn't hear him get down from the car, but he just hit me with some solid metallic rod. The hit was meant to knock me out cold, but maybe he didn't hit me hard enough. Or maybe my head is just really hard. I didn't completely lose my consciousness. Greg went to get something from inside the car. I was certain it was rope to tie me up like he tied up Lucy, and shoved me into his car. I mustered energy and got up. I began to run. I didn't know where I was going. I ran into the road and headed for the woods to the side of it. Greg caught me running away from him. I heard him yell. I also heard him start his engine. He was going to chase me with his car, but he couldn't drive into the woods, so I ran deep into the woods as far as I could. My head was throbbing. My eyes were dizzy. I couldn't think clearly. I still couldn't believe this was happening. Was I dreaming? I screamed loud. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt some blood at the point of contact of Greg's rod against my head. Yeah, this was definitely happening. I was in a nightmare, but this nightmare was very real. I thought about Lucy. That psycho had Lucy tucked like an animal inside his filthy car. Fuck, I needed to do something. What would I do? I needed to save Lucy. I looked around the woods for a vantage point. I found one behind a tree. I found a heavy rock and carried it. I hid behind the tree. When Greg came, he would come right at that tree. Then he would turn to look around in the clearing and pinpoint where I would have headed next. And then that is when I would strike. Somewhere in my mind, I knew there was a 90% chance this plan wouldn't work. I was just speculating things and praying to God that this night ends well for myself and for Lucy. I had a feeling she wasn't dead yet. Greg came into the part of the woods where I was hiding, and to my utmost surprise, his movement was as I planned for. He came to the tree from behind which I was hiding, and then he turned to study the area better. The thing is, from that tree, one could get a good and detailed view of the entire clearing. So in a way, it made sense for Greg to come towards the tree. Quietly, I snuck out from behind, and before Greg could turn completely to see me, I slammed the heavy rock on his head. Unlike his hit, which I survived, my own hit will keep him asleep for hours. I made sure of that because I hit him hard. I left his unconscious body there and ran towards his car outside the woods to find Lucy. I carried her from the trunk into my truck and drove her to the hospital. I called her parents afterwards. We called the police to tell them about the unconscious boy in the woods. I insisted on staying with Lucy till she woke up. She did wake up hours later, late in the middle of the night when her parents and everyone who was out there to see her went home. I was still awake. She asked me what happened. I smiled. Nothing much. Just that some psycho almost took you to his dungeon with the plan to starve you and then carve your stomach, I said and smiled. But you're safe now.